Hello everyone, DonTheCrown here with the final build, I think, here for Rehan 1. We have managed to go and clear out the city defense. We got all the rewards from that. We have cleared out the entirety of the Supreme Showdown. We killed all of the bosses, including Supreme Showdown 21 as well here. And yeah, just got everything done. I will say that 20 was a lot harder than 21 for sure. This one was just a little bit like more annoying. I did videos for these particular ones where you can see the kills for this. But let's just talk about the final build, because really the big thing that helped me clear these fights wasn't necessarily getting my damage up and above 5 trillion DPS. It's really this number down here, the survival number, that really kind of made the difference. And survival being pretty darn important. So let's talk about kind of the changes that we did make. So for the most part here, we are using Fool's Crown here with this corruption spot here, I think, or corroded spot here. I think it's the most important. We actually managed to just keep using a vortex heart the entire time. I think that this is probably a very underrated necklace here. You could save yourself a lot of currency just by using this as opposed to something that's different and more expensive. And then we have a belt here, aura effect, less damage taken, dexterity, damage, double damage, elemental resistance, fire res. Both of our rings are practically the same. Fervor effect, life damage, dex, double damage, fervor, and critical strike damage. And, you know, basically those are going to be the same. Fervor effect is really, really powerful because of our gloves. And the gloves basically give us 1% additional damage per fervor rating. And that pretty much makes it so that every fervor effect is basically 1% more damage, but does kind of like have diminishing returns as you get more of it. I also chose to get gloves here that have corruption on the amount of degen that you have as well. So as little degen as possible. Ideally, this would have been 6% as opposed to 7%. But with the whole setup we have right now, we actually don't like lose life just from standing around, which is pretty nice because that means that we can eventually switch away from using a healing skill because we actually recuperate so much health going in. For the weapon here, this kind of is what we have here. Attack skill level, I think, is better than armor penetration that you could have possibly done. The chest armor here at the very last minute, I changed my explosion to convert fizz to fire damage. And then we dropped off a resistance here for regen, and this along with something else we're using allows us to regen our life back. Boots and stuff are basically going to be covering all of our erosion damage here that's incoming, so we don't need to worry about erosion damage at all or erosion resistance. So as you can see here, our erosion resist is 0, but that doesn't mean anything because we don't take erosion damage at all. And actually some of our resistances are a little bit overcapped, which, you know, is not really the end of the world. And really the big kind of thing that I farmed for a while for were these 4 Kismets. And so we have dual Kismet basically to give us a Spirit Magus effect of the Thunder Magus. We also have one for the Erosion Magus. This just gives us a little bit more damage and attack speed. This one gives us a hefty buff to our damage over time mitigation. And both of these give us 30% Origin of the Spirit Magus effect, which is really, really nice. And pretty much just use defensive pets here for the most part. One offensive pet, I had the Knight of Pale Blue in here, because like in the second part of phase or SS20, you only have one enemy to fight anyways. So this kind of helps out a little bit with surviving some of his nasty attacks. But for the most part, not a lot of damage coming from this. And then we did go through and get like a little bit of sealed mana compensation, mostly like strength, attack block, and other stuff in here. A little bit of cold res because I needed it, and attack block and stuff as well. We're still using the Kismet Spider Fluid for base wilt damage and just to give us a little bit more damage as well. And then we found one of these Undetermined Fates with a 1 medium destiny slot, and I bought a second one as well. And one thing to note here is that Undetermined Fates slots pretty much make it so that you can put more of whatever is in here without hitting the requirements of these other ones. So I have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, I have one. I count wrong. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. I'm like missing one somehow. Oh, here it is. Not here. I'm missing 6. So I have 6 different medium fates because it wasn't a kismet. So with 6 medium fates, because we have 2 extra, it just lets you have more stuff. Realistically, I think that these are probably a little bit overtuned, because if you could afford to buy one of these that has 3 slots into it, or if you could like really whale out and get 3 that have 3, that would give you so many extra medium slots, which are just a lot of damage. And yeah, now I changed my skills around a little bit. We're using ThunderSpike with Rhythm. This is still a 0.3 seconds. Maybe I should have done this to be a 0.2, but it didn't really seem to make too much of a difference to me. I switched out my healing skill here for Frost Shield. Frost Shield because it basically makes us take less physical damage and less fire damage. I'm not really sure, but this did kind of make me feel incredibly tanky while it was active, which was all of the time. And so all of the physical damage incoming, I think, is maybe getting double dipped against. So I'm taking less physical damage. And since it's also converted to fire damage, a lot of it, 60%, we're also reducing that as well. This also applies cold damage to the enemy while it's around you. And because of added physical damage, this does trauma damage as well. So that's 2 of our debuffs that we have to apply. Any other stuff here is just to make sure that it's up 100% of the time. And then leap attack, we have our fire and our lightning here. I actually just realized now that I didn't even need to have lightning here because we are doing Thunder Spike. I don't really know why I left this on here. You do something like blind or something else instead. Doing fearless and weapon amplification, precise, restrained, and concentrated. This is pretty much going to be needed in order to hold all of the auras and stuff that we have. We have Rock Magus, which gives us a large amount of damage reduction per hit. And things like Superpower here gives us even more. This is basically 5% less damage taken. You have to remember those 2 destinies also give us another basically 30%, which is 3% damage reduction from hits for this. Protection Field also scales that up. So we have another like 4% damage reduction from Protection Field. And this effect is affected by the Spirit Magus effect. So this is actually closer to like 9% damage reduction. And then over here we have Summon Frost Magus. It also has the Protection Field. I didn't have enough to actually do Superpower as well. I could have probably done a like Sealed Mana Compensation medium and maybe some like smalls on my other places, or maybe on my candles or somewhere. But like this is just kind of like what we ended up with. I was considering even like going and getting precise restraints for these spots here, but I kind of felt like I was tanky enough. I could have also potentially switched out the Protection Field for Friend of the Spirit Magus, or I could even just like made this actually work here for another 5% DR, which would have been fine as well. But this is kind of just like what we landed on. And for the most part, we felt pretty darn tanky. It was very, very nice. Let me just pull up the kill here. You can kind of see that like when we are actually going and fighting SS20, there's like a lot of time here where we're like taking damage and we just kind of like pop it back pretty quickly, or we just like don't even like take very much damage at all because we just have so much block right now. Oh, and how do we have so much block? Like, how are we so tanky that we can pretty much just ignore mechanics while we're doing this? Well, we changed out our passives a little bit. And so now our second tree here is Ronin. Now we did lose quite a bit of, maybe not quite a bit, but a little bit of damage from doing this. So we picked up Defensiveness now, which gives us block ratio. And this can go up to, you start off at 30%, and you get up to a total of 60% block ratio. But if you have a 100% chance to block everything, it's basically 60% less damage, which is pretty wild. And we have trade-off here as well, which allows us to buy a much cheaper slate. We go through here, pick up a lot of block. There's critical strike stuff, fervor effect stuff, block chance stuff, lots of regain, more fervor effect, life, more block ratio. This is like 5% less damage here, which is really nice. And then these here. Now, one thing to note is if you're following this tree, you need to unspec these points when you are trying to balance your strength and dexterity. Otherwise, it's going to be practically impossible for you to figure out exactly what you need, because there is some rounding and stuff on the UI. And so by having anything that's giving you percentage dexterity or percentage strength is going to kind of mess with that. So just unspec these points, balance your strength and dex, and then spend them back again. The rest of the trees are pretty much the same as what they were before. Just kind of show them real quick. Maybe a little bit of stuff moved around to kind of get a little bit more spell block here, for example. But this pretty much like made us incredibly tanky. I think from like the last 2 days of us leveling to 100, we died like 2 times while farming profound, and that was with me like intentionally trying to like throw myself into every mechanic, like tanking all of the Arcana stuff, tanking all of the effects and stuff. And so it just made us feel very, 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 very tanky, which is just a lot of fun. The other things that we kind of did with our slates, these are our final slate setup. So we end up going with hair trigger, which is one of the things that we lost for changing our passives. And then we got mind flow. I'm not sure that mind flow is actually super great, but it could be pretty insane because it could give you up to 40% more damage. You just kind of have to be avoiding taking damage, which maybe can be a little bit difficult for sure. This did have numb chance, which was okay, but I think that this slate cost me like 100 FE. I was only one up for 70, whereas one with trade-off right now is going to be a lot more expensive. So it felt like a pretty good trade-off, if you would. The slates down here, we have additional attack speed if we crit. This is touching our sparks. That also have another one for negative elemental damage taken. That's getting touched by both the moth and the sparks. We have a inflict additional numbed. Found this was pretty important to keeping the numb stacks pretty high and more additional elemental damage taken. Then another sparks here, touching our physical skill level. And then over here we have, I think this slate hasn't changed here. And this one we actually did re-roll a new one. So we had physical skill level fervor effect before. I did physical skill level sealed mana, and then I rolled for the physical on the bottom. I mean, realistically, fervor effect would probably have been a little bit better there. However, just like this is kind of how it turned out. And I think the fervor effect, like 25% fervor effect and sealed mana would probably be a little bit more damage, but it's really kind of just like a little bit of this, a little bit of that. I think you're probably fine either way, and just picking up as much block as we possibly can. So we kind of end up being here at capped out block, and our damage block ratio at 60%. Just makes you just incredibly tanky. We have a little bit of evasion, a little bit of armor, which is pretty nice. But overall, the entire thing just felt pretty darn smooth. Couldn't face tank like some of the like one-shot style mechanics, and definitely like couldn't eat too many mechanics. But for the most part, the fight did feel pretty doable with the build, and we still have like quite a bit of speed, quite a bit of damage. The only thing we're kind of missing now is having the explode on the body armor, but besides that, it's pretty good. If you want to see some more gameplay footage, there's a whole bunch from my SS20 and SS21 kill videos, but really just want to kind of go over the final build and kind of what I was thinking. I just really think that like this was really rather tanky, but the one thing I really rather disliked, oh, I also didn't show you hero memories. So hero memories we went through and we got spell block, we have physical critical strike damage. Critical strike damage, like that specific, gives you more critical strike damage, so I think that that's better to roll here. And I actually got like a random max life roll, and I was going to roll this off for something else, like, but I realized that having 18% more life was pretty much like having 18% like just more life. It's like a big effective health boon for us, and so that's just like another way of scaling our defensive layers, since we've kind of like already scaled blocks and a lot of all the other stuff here. So I felt like this was fine here. The one thing I'm kind of hoping that they fix next season is this trait here, which I think is going to maybe make Rehan feel a lot worse next season, because pretty much what rampaging does right now is it scales up our cooldown, which means that even if you aren't hitting the enemy, the burst is going to keep proccing itself infinitely. And we can see if I untake that trait, that no longer happens. And so it is this particular thing that is like messing basically with the like overall gameplay. So hopefully they'll kind of fix that a little bit, but if they do that, it's going to kind of be bad for the build, because right now we aren't really like actually actively procking anything. And so I think that next season, if I like kind of revamp this or do this again, we probably won't be able to use like activation medium rhythm. Probably have to use something like wind rhythm or something. So, and these typically be a lot more expensive. So typically it triggers at 0.5 seconds, with 100% of the bonuses and additional bonuses for cast speed are applied to cooldown. So actually doesn't, this won't even work either because this is not attack speed and cast speed. I thought it was both. So yeah, I'm not really sure where this build is going to go next season. It might actually be in a little bit of trouble. Might actually have to go back to like procking with Whirlwind and actually hitting with it. And I'm not really sure if we're actually hitting the breakpoints correctly right now, and because the burst is kind of carrying us quite a bit, but we'll have to see. This is kind of just what worked for me in Arcana League, and we'll have to see what moving forward looks like. It's been a lot of fun, and hopefully this video has helped you out a little bit, and hope your journey to SS20 and beyond is a smooth one. We'll see you again soon. Thanks so much.